Hello and welcome back. In this section, we're going to use clipping masks to refine our selection based on hair. It's a very useful technique that's going to come in handy so many times. Basically, anytime you cut something out of its background, I highly recommend using clipping masks to clean up your image. So getting into Photoshop, we're in Chapter 2, Section 6, Clipping Mask. Let's go ahead and open this image up, and I'm going to hit F for full screen. Now, in this case, we have our subject on a yellow background. And the background's pretty much all yellow. So the best way looking at this right now is to turn that yellow into a selection and then use that as a layer mask. So we can do that by going into Select and down to Color Range, and I can simply select on this yellow, and I'm pretty sure that there's no other super yellow areas in this image. Now, in this case, I clicked here, and that looks pretty good for the top, but the bottom it's not being selected. So let's just go to the plus eyedropper, and we can just add to this. There we go. We've added to that, and we can see now pretty good, right? We'll just bring our fuzziness down just a little bit. You can see more of our subjects becoming visible. There we go. All right, something like that looks really nice. So let's hit OK. Now that we have that as a selection, let's go ahead and click on our layer mask. Okay, I'm going to invert my layer mask by hitting Control or Command I. That inverts our layer mask. Now we're going to grab a solid color fill layer. Let's just choose like a bright colored blue and put that right under our subject. Okay, so you can see there's a little bit of yellow still outlining our subject. That's totally okay. That's why we're using clipping masks. Basically, that's called fringing. Anytime you see another color right on the edge of your selection, usually it's light or dark. In this case, it's yellow. That's something we're working with. We're also working with the fact that our hair selection is pretty nice here. Like if I hold Alt or Option and click on my layer mask, pretty nice. But I think we can make this a little bit better of a selection. And remember, the best way to do that is with channels. So let's hold Shift and click on our layer mask. That just disables the layer mask. That's all that does. So Shift and click on that layer mask. Now let's go back to our channels. I'm looking for contrast here between light and dark. So let's go to our red channel, our green channel. Here we go. Red, green, and blue. Okay. So red channel, I can't really even see this hair detail. Green channel, looking a little bit better. Blue channel, not so great. So let's go to our green channel. We'll duplicate this channel. So click and drag that down to the new channel icon. And let's hit Control or Command L for our levels. I'm going to make my whites a little bit brighter. There we go. And something like that looks pretty good. I just want this fine detail there. You know, that's the fine detail that makes the selection look good. So that looks pretty good. Now let's turn this into a selection. Control or Command, click on that layer. Or on that channel rather. Always remember that selects the light areas. Okay. Now in this case I want her hair selected, so that's the dark areas. So I go to Select and then down to Inverse, and now her hair is selected. Going back to my layers, let's just go ahead and click on our layer mask. I'm going to paint with my brush tool. Let's just choose a regular brush here. We're going to choose to paint with our brush tool, and I'm going to paint white with my brush tool. Because remember, we selected the hair, and now I want to make more hair visible, because it's okay, but it could use a little bit of refinement. We're going to paint white, which is going to make it visible only where the hair is. Now the last step here, just because I don't like seeing my selection, it gets in the way of what when I'm working, hit Control or Command H, and we've done this before in the tutorial. So Control or Command H, that will hide your selection. So now we've selected the hair. I'm going to paint white on my layer mask, and that's just going to paint some hair back visible. Let's go ahead and paint that back visible. It's subtle, and it's yellow, but it's coming back. There we go, and we'll go all the way around back down to there too. Okay, let's deselect. So now if I hold Alt or Option, now that's what my layer mask looks like. Right? Big change. You guys remember what the layer mask looked like before? Not all that detailed. So we're looking much better. Only thing is it's yellow, right? And we have a blue background. So now this is where clipping masks come in. So for many years I would get to this point and I'm like, oh, my selection isn't good. Like, I need to refine my selection. And most of the time, that's not the case. But most of the time, your selection's totally fine. You just need to use a clipping mask to get rid of your fringing. And that's what's going on here. The selection is actually great. It doesn't look great because there's all that yellow, but we just take away the yellow, it's going to look really good. Here's how we do it. We're going to create a new layer. Now, with this new layer, let's just grab a color that we can all see. There we are. And we're just going to paint right over top of our subject, kind of paint everywhere. There we are. And this is a regular layer. I can move it around. Nothing special about this layer. If I right-click on this layer and go to Create Clipping Mask, now it becomes only visible where this layer is visible. And we have used this several times before. I'm just explaining it in more depth here. So it becomes visible only where the underlying layer is visible. I can still move it around. Okay, there's nothing that's keeping it in place. These are only tied to each other by the fact that it's clipped, making it only visible where this other layer is visible. Now, I could have another layer, and I can paint with another color here. Let's hit B for the brush tool. I can paint with another color here, and I can clip this one too. So right-click and go to Create Clipping Mask. Okay, I can clip that too, and it's also only visible where my subject is. We can also use adjustment layers. For instance, if I go to Hue/Saturation, okay, let's say I just bump the hue up, and I only want that to be visible where my subject is. Right-click, Create Clipping Mask, bunk, it's only visible with my subject. You can see it's not affecting the background. Okay, these are extreme examples. Obviously, we don't need to do that for this case, but you can see here, check this out, this hue saturation, that's affecting even that fine hair detail. This layer that, let's just turn that off, that is yellow is visible in that fine hair detail too, and this green is also visible in that fine hair detail. So, what we're going to do now, let's just delete those layers because we don't need them. We're going to create a new layer, and we're going to clip this. So, again, right-click and go to Create Clipping Mask. By the way, the keyboard shortcut is Option-Command-G if you're on a Mac. It's going to be Alt-Control-G if you're on a PC. Now that this is clipped, we're going to use our clone stamp tool. So let's hit S for the clone stamp tool. I'm going to sample inside here, inside of our subject's hair, and simply just paint it right out to the edge. So what I'm doing is I'm literally just painting hair on a new layer with our clone stamp tool, and this hair just happens to be visible only where the underlying layer is visible. There we go. And using the power of the clone stamp tool in conjunction with our clipping masks, we're able to take this yellow that we see there and turn it right back into hair. So cool. Just a really, really great use of a couple different features of Photoshop. There we are. So let's turn this layer off and on, and you can see such a good way to make a selection of hair. We made our selection using a combination. First, we did select color range to take care of most of the background. Then we used channels to refine the hair, and now we're popping in a clipping mask to color our hair. If I right-click and go to Release Clipping Mask, you can see I just painted hair around the edge, right? Like that's all this layer is. I can move it around. It's not that special. I mean, it is special. Let's right-click, we'll go to Create Clipping Mask, and now it's just visible where that hair is. And that's a really, really nice selection. So, can you do that on other parts of your image, you ask? And you most certainly can. Let's grab a new layer and clip that also. You can just do the same thing with the whole rest of your image. Basically, anytime you cut anything out of your image, or anything out of its background, you can use clipping masks to completely remove the fringe. Okay, now I'm using a clone stamp here. Okay, you could use your brush tool. You can use adjustment layers. There's really no limit to what you can do. You could even, like if you liked the light level of that, you could say a new layer, and I'm going to change this layer blend mode from normal to hue, and then I'm just going to grab the hue of this jacket and just paint that in. So it's removing the yellow hue, but it's keeping the light value. There we go. So grab that hue and paint that in there too. So you can see that also works. There's a lot of different things you can do here. So this is looking great. Let's just finish it up. We'll create a new layer. Let's clip that and make a really small brush here. There we go. And we're just kind of painting right around our edge here. Now you could definitely go into select and mask here if you want and just simply work on your selection. There we are. That would most definitely be an option here as well. I just want to show you how to do this with clipping masks. So many times when you think, oh, my selection isn't good, I need to refine my selection, a lot of the time your selection's probably totally fine. All you got to do is use a clipping mask, paint around the edge. There we go, just like this. And you are good to go. Well, there we have it. Cutting out our subject using a clipping mask. This is one of my favorite tools in Photoshop. I think it's going to make a huge difference for your workflow as well. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. In our next chapter, we're jumping into specific examples. We're going to show you how to cut out straight hair and curly hair, hair on simple backgrounds and complicated backgrounds. We've got a lot of great things waiting up for you. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next chapter.